What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and I'm bringing you guys my top 10 edge rushers in the 2024 NFL Draft. And I've watched about 20 or so of these edge rushers, and these are the 10 I think are the best. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, starting us off here at number 10, I do have Marshon Neal, the edge rusher out of Western Michigan. He's 6'3", 268 pounds, so he's more of a thumper. He's low to the ground, but real stocky. And in 2023, put up 4.5 sacks, 28 pressures, 2 forced fumbles, and 29 tackles. So, not the most productive season for a guy who's already playing lower competition there at Western Michigan. So that's one knock I do have on him right away. But some of the pros, let's start off with the pros. I think he's got a really, really nice power profile, especially, really in the pass game and in the run defense game. But I don't think he's straight just a power guy. I think that's his go-to is to win with power, but I think he has some really nice counters off of the initial power move. He's got a really nice inside swim to beat offensive tackles. I think he's got a good rip through. And on top of that, he has really good, quick feet, a really good get-off for his size. Again, he's no, Chop Robinson or Dallas Turner, who we'll get to in a little bit. Like, he's obviously a bit bigger, but for his size, he has a really good get-off. And then, basically everything in the run defense game, he's, above average at. He's able to hold his ground, hold his anchor, fill run gaps. I don't have any concerns about his tackling ability or being able to wrap up ball carriers. So, all in all, for who I think Marshon Neal is, at least pros-wise, is he's got a really good power profile. He's going to win with a lot of power in the NFL, but if he can't win with power, he does have a couple of counters he goes to, like the inside swim and the rip move, and then he's also just a really good run defender. The things that make him not as great, in my opinion, is, for one, overall, he's not the most athletic guy in the world. I mean, like I said, he's got a good get-off for his size, but he's not going to win with many finesse moves. And he also doesn't have great bend, so again, that's why he relies on the power and a swim move, because he's not able to bend on that outside tackle. And then, again, lower competition, only 4.5 sacks. I get that, he's more of a run defender, but you want your edge rushers, especially if you're playing at Western Michigan and not playing, the best competition. You want that sack number to be, around that 8 sacks range. 28 pressures isn't terrible, but again, you'd like to see a little bit more. So overall, I think Marshon Neal could be either a low-end number 2 pass rusher on a team or a really good rotational 3rd pass rusher. Or on, obvious rundowns, you can throw him out on the field. But I don't think he's ever going to have that upside to be definitely not a team's number 1 pass rusher. And I also don't think he's going to be a high-end, number 2 edge rusher in the league either. But I wouldn't be mad at a team taking him in, probably mid to late round 3. He could sneak into round 2. I wouldn't be surprised at that, but I think his sweet spot is right around the middle of round 3. And coming in at number 9, I do have Adisa Isaac, the edge rusher from Penn State. And he's a 6'4", 247-pound pass rusher. So, he's got really solid size. And in 2023, put up 7.5 sacks. 20 pressures, a forced fumble, and 23 tackles. So, a good, I would say a pretty solid stat line for 2023, especially when he was playing alongside Chop Robinson, who we'll get to in a little bit. And for some of his pros, I have, first of all, he's a phenomenal run defender. If anything in the NFL, he's going to be a really good, obvious rundown play guy. I do think his pass rush technique and pass rush ability needs to catch up to his run defense, but he has just really good awareness on where the running back's going to be at. He's really good at, shedding off blocks. He's got really good hand placement. He knows, to keep his hands inside, basically everything to do with run defense, he's really solid at. But the thing that trips me up about Adisa Isaac is that he's just such an average athlete for his size. He leaves a lot to be desired in the athletic department. I don't think he's got the best, pass rush repertoire. He relies a lot on, more finesse and bend. And for a player that, is pretty average when it comes to finesse and bend, I don't understand it. I would like to see him try to use a little bit more power when he's, rushing the passer. So yeah, he's just, he's so limited. I don't want to say so limited athletically, but he's just, he's just average. He doesn't have a great get off. His bend is, nothing to write home about. I'm not going to say it's bad by any means, but I do think his get off is pretty bad. Doesn't have many pass rush moves and is limited athletically. So what that leaves me with is a pretty, high floored run defender. And teams don't, necessarily value that as much anymore. They want a guy that's going to be able to get after the quarterback because that's what makes edge rushers so valuable nowadays. And I just don't know if Adisa Isaac's ever going to be able to, have his pass rush game catch up to his run defense game. So, his floor is pretty solidly, high just because of his run defense. So if anything, that's what a team's going to draft him for, in the 3rd round. And that's why I have him a little bit higher than Marshon Neal, just because I like his floor a little bit more than Marshon Neal. All right, coming in at number 8, we got Chris Braswell, the edge rusher out of Alabama, and he's the first of 2 that we're going to be talking about from Alabama. He's 6'3", 252 pounds, so, he's got that prototypical size for an edge rusher. And in 2023, he put up 8 sacks, 33 pressures, 3 forced fumbles, and 16 tackles. So out of the guys we've talked about so far, Chris Braswell has definitely had the best 2023 season. And when it comes to Chris Braswell, he's almost the opposite of Adisa Isaac, where Adisa Isaac has, a really high floor in the run defense game, but is a bit lackluster pass rush wise. I think Chris Braswell is very lackluster when it comes to the run defense game, but has really high potential when it comes to his pass rushing ability. I think he utilizes the bull rush really, really well. I think he's got really good power, and he kind of bases everything off of that bull rush. I think he's got really good hand usage. He's working on a cross chop move to kind of counter the bull rush if the bull rush doesn't work. But the thing about his cross chop is, for one, you need really good hand usage, which I think he has. But you also need really good bend as well, and that's something that I don't think Chris Braswell has. I think he utilizes the swim move, pretty well if the bull rush isn't there. But yeah, when it comes to pass rush, I like his potential. I think he's got really good hand usage. I think he's got solid get off. I think he's, solid when it comes to the, athletic department. But what really just, stumps me up with Chris Braswell is just he's almost non-existent in the run game, which is, really unusual for Alabama edge rushers to, not be good in the run defense game, because, Nick Saban's defenses are always really good against the run, and that's just not Chris Braswell. I don't think he's got a really good anchor when it comes to the run defense game. He doesn't play with much power. I think he struggles to, shed off blocks, and I don't think he has the awareness either to, diagnose where the run's going. And pair that with, limited bend and, limited effort in general when it comes to run defense, I really think that affects a lot on, how he's going to be able to get onto the field year one when he gets to the NFL. I don't think he's going to be trusted to be, get on the field on early down situations just because he's almost non-existent in the run right now. So, again, I really like his high pass rush upside, but, he's just got such a low floor when it comes to his run defense that it kind of scares me a little bit. But I'm a believer in Chris Braswell. I think that his pass rush upside is going to, carry him to be a second round pick almost. But I think he's really comfortably in that second round conversation. Probably mid second round to early second round. And, I wouldn't be mad if a team took him there. I don't think he gets into the first round by any means. But I think if a team's really desperate for an edge rusher and he's still there in day 2, I think a team's going to, run to the podium and try to draft him. Moving on to number 7, we got Jonah Ellis, the edge rusher out of Utah. And he's a bit on the smaller side at 6'2", 248 pounds, which, we'll get to does affect him a little bit. But in 2023, which was shortened due to a shoulder injury, he put up 12 sacks, 24 pressures, a forced fumble, and 23 tackles. And again, that was cut short due to a shoulder injury. So he was on pace to have a very, very productive 2023 before the shoulder injury. And we'll get to talk about that a little bit later. But first, I want to focus on his pros because I think he's got a lot of them. He is one of the most refined pass rushers in this class, probably behind a guy like Leatu Latu, who we'll get to in a little bit. But Jonah Ellis has, at least he's put on display almost every pass rush move in the books. I think he's got a really good swim move. I think he's got really good bend for his size. He's got natural leverage, which helps him in, his bull rush. He's got a cross chop. He's got a swim move. He's got all the counters. He's got all the finesse. And so I really, really, really like his pass rush upside. I think he's got really good leverage, again, with that 6'2 frame. And that also helps him in the run game. But I still don't think he's the best in run defense. So going on to some of his cons, I think his size limits him on how good he'll be in the run defense game. But I also don't think he's got the best vision. I don't think he's able to diagnose where the run's going and where the runner's going to be at. So, not the best run defender. I don't think he'll ever be the greatest run defender when he gets to the NFL, but I think he's going to be an amazing pass rusher. I could see him, consistently having 8 to 10 sacks a year once he gets to the NFL. I think he's going to be a really solid number 2 pass rusher on a team. The only thing that really sucks about Jonah Ellis is that we didn't get to see him through this draft process. He didn't get to test to see how athletic he was at the combine. We didn't see him at the Senior Bowl, so we didn't get to see, how he would do against, in the one-on-ones during practice. We didn't get to see any of that. And I know for a lot of draft media, like the YouTubers and stuff like that, if, we don't see him on the TV screens on, at the Senior Bowl or at the draft combine, we tend to forget about a player. And I'm really trying not to do that with Jonah Ellis because I think he's got really high upside, and I think he's going to be a really good player in the league. So, I really wanted to try to fit him in my top 5, but I couldn't really do it. I had to settle at number 7. But I do think this is where we're going to get a tier gap. I think Jonah Ellis is in a clear tier above all the guys we've talked about so far in Marshon Neal, Adisa Isaac, and Chris Braswell. I think Jonah Ellis has definitely, solidified himself as a better player than those guys. And I wouldn't be mad if a team took him very early day 2. I don't think he's going to be in that first round conversation just due to his shoulder injury. But I think he's got the talent to be a top 32 player in this draft. All right, moving on to number 6, we got Darius Robinson. And, some people consider him a defensive tackle. Some people consider him an edge rusher. I'm ranking him in my edge rushers. He played out of Missouri, and he's 6'5", 285 pounds, so he's a big guy. I think he's got the versatility to play either 3-tech or 5-tech. He can play on the outside as well. In 2023, he played majority on the edge, and he put up 8.5 sacks, 27 pressures, a forced fumble, and 29 tackles. So, moving on to some of his pros is, for one, he's versatile. You can play him on the edge, and he could be a really good run defender, or you can play him in the 3-tech, and he could be a more penetrating 3-tech. It really just depends on which team drafts him. I think he's got a really good anchor when it comes to the run defense game. I don't really see him getting moved off the line of scrimmage at all. And I also think he's got really good power to be able to, knock offensive tackles back. And I think he can utilize a really good bull rush move in the NFL. But realistically, he's just going to be a really, really solid run defender. He's got all the technique in the world when it comes to run defense. He's able to, shed off blocks with ease. He's able to diagnose where the run's going to be going. But due to his size, I think he's going to be limited athletically. He didn't have the greatest testing numbers when you're throwing him in the edge rusher group. If you throw him into the defensive tackle group, that's a different story. But, as an edge rusher, he doesn't have really good bend. He's not going to be the type of guy that's going to, beat a tackle to the outside and, have extreme bend to get to the quarterback. He's definitely more of a power guy. He'll be really solid in the run game. And I think he could maybe get into the first round. He had a really good draft process. Senior Bowl was incredible for him, and I think that's really what put him on the map for a lot of people. But I still don't see him as a first round guy. I still see him as an early day 2 guy, but I wouldn't be mad if a team like maybe the Lions drafted him in the first round, or a team in the back end of round 1. I wouldn't be mad at it, but I would much rather have him as a day 2 type of guy. All right, coming in at number 5, I do have BrinnTrace, the edge rusher out of Washington, and he's a bit of an interesting build. I have him listed at 6'3", 245 pounds because that's what he came in at the combine at, but I do think he lost about 20 pounds just to try to test better, which he didn't really test great. So I do think his playing weight is more of that 260, 265 pounds. And in 2023, he put up 9 sacks, 46 pressures, a forced fumble, and 30 tackles. And so this guy's just been a production machine the past 2 years, putting up insane pressure numbers, and sacks as well. He's had, a good amount of sacks each year too, but really he's just, he's getting after the quarterback. I believe in 2022 he was second in the, all of college football in pressures. Put up 46 pressures this year, so this guy knows how to get after the quarterback. He's got a super high motor. He wins with power for the most part. Like his go-to move is the bull rush, but he can also work off that as well. He's got really good inside counter moves. I think he's got a really nice cross chop. I think he can shut off of blocks, and I think he's going to get a lot of what I like to call blue collar sacks in the NFL, which are just you don't maybe necessarily win initially off the line of scrimmage, but you just you keep fighting, you don't give up on the play, and if the quarterback holds onto the ball a little too long, that's when you get your sack. And I think he's going to get a lot of those in the NFL just because he's got such a a super high motor. But some of the cons I have is he's not the best, he's not the most athletic guy in the world. He came into the combine and apparently dropped a lot of weight and still tested below average, so you don't really like to see that. I don't think he had the most bend in the world, at least from the tape I've seen. So he's not going to be the most bendy guy who's going to bend on the outside of the tackle and get to the quarterback that way. I think that's one of the only limitations he has as a pass rusher, really. And then another thing that I didn't write down on here, but I do think he's got a bit of a lighter lower half. I think he's really powerful from the waist up. He's got super strong hands, again, the bull rush, but I think his lower half is a bit slim in my opinion, so that'll affect him in the run defense game. And I think he's a serviceable run defender. I don't think he's nothing special, but he's also, he's no liability by any means either. And I think due to his poor combine appearance, I do think that knocks him out of first round contention. But if I was a GM, I would be fine with drafting him in the first round. You don't want his poor combine to affect what you've seen on tape. What you see on tape is very, very good. So I don't see him being a first round kind of player, but I would draft him in the first round if that makes sense. All right, coming in at number 4, we got Chop Robinson, the edge rusher out of Penn State, and he's 6'3", 254 pounds, and he's an athletic freak. In 2023, put up 5 sacks, 34 pressures, 2 forced fumbles, and 16 tackles. So that's the kind of story with Chop Robinson. Not the most productive season, and not really the most productive player in general. When you look at his pros, he's got one of the quickest first steps I've ever seen. He's got great straight line speed, as you could see in the 40-yard dash at the combine. He's got all the athletic tools to become a very, very, very good pass rusher. But he just hasn't put it all together yet. Moving on to some of his cons, his power profile's, not really there, but, he's more of a finesse player anyways. He's just very inconsistent. He doesn't have many pass rush moves. I think he still relies a lot on just being more athletic than, every tackle he goes against. And in the NFL, that's not necessarily going to happen as much as it did in college. So you want to see him be more productive. You want to see him be more consistent, but you can't deny the athletic tools this guy has. When you watch the tape, you can tell, he's very raw, very, very raw, but he's got very, very good tools and he's very athletic. So, I don't know where to rank Chop Robinson. I struggled finding, whether I want to put him at, 5 or 6 or even 7. I decided to put him at 4 because I'm banking on those athletic tools. And I also think a team's going to fall in love with these athletic tools. And I have a funny feeling that he is going to be drafted in the first round. The back end of the first round. But I do think he's going to end up being in the first round. I personally would probably draft him early day 2. I think he could go to the Panthers, maybe. At the very top of the second round. So I don't really know what else to say about Chop Robinson. I want to see him get more polished. But the athletic tools are there. Alright, coming in at number 3, we got Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State, and he's 6'4", 254 pounds, so that's, perfect size for an edge rusher in my opinion. And in 2023, he did have a bit of a down year with only 9 sacks, 36 pressures, a forced fumble, and 23 tackles. I do think he had a better 2022 than 2023. And, I think if he would have came out in the 2023 draft, he would have been he would have been a lot more higher of a pick, probably a top 10 pick, as opposed to now where he's more of a middle to late first round pick in my opinion. But moving on to some of his pros, I think he's got the best bull rush in this class. And what separates his bull rush from, the other people's bull rush we've talked about so far is that his bull rush is just so explosive. His lower half and his hands are like dynamite. He's got really good power, really good bull rush. He's got a really good first step as well. He's just super explosive. He's an explosive athlete. The things that trip me up though is that, he's got a really good bull rush, but if that bull rush doesn't work for whatever reason, he's basically just stuck. He doesn't really have many counter moves, to pair alongside the bull rush. So you want to see him, maybe develop some more, a better repertoire when it comes to his pass rushing ability. I have production, he didn't have bad production, but he just, he took a step down from his 2022 season. And then when it comes to run defense, I know I said he's got an explosive lower half, but for some reason when I watch the tape, he doesn't have a really good anchor when it comes to run defense. I think despite having an explosive lower half, it is a bit of a lighter lower half, which affects the run game more than it does the pass rushing ability. So, I would like to see him become a better run defender to kind of, become the all-around really good edge rusher. And I think that's why I ended up having him at number 3. Now, these top 3 guys are very, very close for me. So it's kind of, I was having to nitpick certain things with these certain players to, have a solidified 3, 2, and 1. So Jared Verse did end up with number 3 for me just because of his run defense and his lack of pass rush moves other than the bull rush. Moving on to number 2, I do have Laiatu Latu, the edge rusher out of UCLA, and he stands at 6'5", 259 pounds, so really good size. But the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb with Laiatu Latu and something you got to talk about is his injury history. He was forced to medically retire back at Washington, and he was able to come back and transfer to UCLA, and he played 2 really good, healthy seasons for UCLA. So, we never really know the medical side of things. Apparently, from what I've heard, he's passed a lot of teams' medicals, so I guess we'll have to see. Again, as draft fans, we don't really get to know them, every team's medicals and every team's interviews. Those are the kind of things we're left in the dark about, so you never really know about his injury history, so that could be a reason he falls down people's draft boards. But in 2023 he put up 15 sacks, 36 pressures, 2 forced fumbles, and 28 tackles. So a really productive 2023. He had a really productive 2022, and the reason for that is because this guy's pass rush repertoire is so deep. Like, he has just a bag of tricks. He can pull out the bull rush, he can pull out the swim move, the spin move, the cross chop. He can do it all. I think he's the most technically refined pass rusher in this class by a mile. He's got a really high motor, really good power profile. The only things you worry about is his injury history, obviously, and he doesn't have the best bend. Like, he's not going to be able to be super bendy on the outside and get around an edge or an offensive tackle that way. But besides that, he's, an amazing pass rusher. The only thing I will say about Laiatu Latu is he might not have the highest ceiling. He might be capped out on what he's able to do. Guys like Jared Verse and, spoiler alert, number 1 is Dallas Turner. Those 2 guys may have a higher ceiling, but I think Laiatu Latu is going to definitely have the best rookie year, in year 1 in the NFL, just because he's the most polished. He just doesn't have that ceiling like a guy like Jared Verse and Dallas Turner have. And at number 1, we have Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama. He's 6'3", 247 pounds, so maybe a bit on the smaller side, but that's not necessarily too much of a concern for me. In 2023, put up 10 sacks, 33 pressures, 2 forced fumbles, and 28 tackles. And my main thing about Dallas Turner back in summer scouting was his production. I thought he was, very, very raw and wasn't very productive up until 2023. And he had a very productive 2023. Again, 10 sacks, 33 pressures is really good. But I do still think he's a little bit raw. I think he's got great athletic tools. He's got, he blew the combine out of the water. He's got, all the tools in the world. Great bend, athleticism, amazing burst off the line of scrimmage. But he doesn't have the best pass rush repertoire. Like I said with Leatu Latu, he has, all the bags or all the tricks in the bag. Dallas Turner really just relies on his athleticism. Similar to a guy like Chop Robinson, I think Dallas Turner's, he relies a little too much on his athletic ability and just tries to out-athlete offensive tackles. And that's just not going to work in the NFL as it did in, in college. I do think he's a little bit more refined than Chop Robinson, and that's why I have him at number 1 as opposed to number 4. But he's still raw. He still needs, he still has a lot to learn. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have the best rookie season just because of that. He's going to rely a lot on his athleticism, and that's just not going to work in the NFL. But I do think he will end up being the best pass rusher in this class come 2 or 3 years or at the end of everyone's rookie contracts. I just think he's going to take a little bit of time to, season up and, add a little bit of strength, add a little bit of refinement to his pass rush moves. And I do think he has the upside to become a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL one day. So that's why I have Dallas Turner at number 1. I just believe in his upside more than guys like Leatu Latu, Jared Verse, and Chop Robinson. But yeah, that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of my rankings down below. I'm going to be putting out all my position rankings. We got defensive tackles coming up, running backs. We're going to go through all of them up until the draft. We're also going to be having mock drafts on the channel, mock draft reactions. There's a lot to look forward to. So if you like my content, please consider subscribing. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.